Well, we're here to tell you how we introduced our pigs to our new property. We had a big setup up north, didn't have that down here, so how do we work with virgin land? Well, if you watched our recent update video from a few weeks back, you'll notice our cute little pigs that we brought home were in the paddock right behind me. Now, we knew that was going to be a sacrifice paddock and they were really going to tear it up, but it was part of the training plan to get them familiar with the hot wire and comfortable with this area so they wouldn't want to escape. All right, we've had some rains recently, and when it rains, that ground gets real soft. The pigs churn it up real nice. They've pretty much eaten all the small roots, a lot of worms and bugs, and overturn the logs to get what they can. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move them into a slightly bigger area, and I'm now setting the electric wire. Now what I want to do is I want to set that at nose height, but I use 2 strands because these hogs are growing, and they're growing pretty quick. So if I set it at a certain height, nose height, and then the next week I got to raise it, raise it, raise it. Instead, I do 2 strands. What I'm doing here is as he comes over, I'm trying to measure his nose height. And he's come over and sniffed my knee a little bit, and I've got a reference on that stick about where his nose is. And that helps me out because that allows me to put the wire right where I want it. I'm just checking his height real quick, and his back height also, I'm checking that, and that lets me know exactly where that wire needs to be. Right, buddy? Yeah, you can eat that twig once I'm done here, okay? Thanks. Now that I know his nose height, I just take that same stick and I make sure the top one is at the nose and the bottom one's at 6 inches lower than that. So in the corners, I always use plastic or fiberglass poles because if these little insulators here get pulled too tight, they'll spin around and the wire can ground out on the rebar. So because those fiberglass and plastic poles have set distances, what I do is I turn the corner with that, and then I put a pole right next to it to use the insulators on the rebar to space the wires appropriately. So I've gone ahead and disconnected the wire in there, rolled it up, and connected the box to the wire out here. I don't want the pigs to ever encounter that not being electrified. I don't want them to think that sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off, or if I go fast enough, I can get through it. I want them to always respect it, so I'm always careful to make sure they never have an opportunity to go through an uncharged line. As you can see, we're still training them, so I've still got fence on the outside. The next move, they will have no fence. They will only have the double wire and nothing else behind it. Notice the pigs are on the edge of where the line used to be. They'll do that for a little while, and then usually if I have a group of about 10 or 12, one will actually cross the line, and then another and another and another. But they're very leery. There's no line there, there's no fence there, there's nothing there, but they're very curious. They've never been ever crossed that, and now they're thinking, should I go or should I not? If it takes them a long enough time, I'll put food on the other side and entice them across, but eventually they'll come across, and then they'll be comfortable. I left to pick up the kids from school, and they are clearly on the outside of the old pen, burrowing up. 38% of their diet is roots, so mostly what they're looking for now are worms, bugs, roots, and typically they don't touch their food for a couple days because they get plenty of forage here in the woods. Once they're trained to this wire, they will get about an acre that they can go through the woods and do this with, so they are happy, happy pigs. Look at those noses at work. Well, phase 2 brought us into this area, and it wasn't very long. Within a couple of days, I was able to take the fence down, and they stayed behind the wire, and I felt comfortable to go to phase 3. But you'll notice the ground is not nearly as barren as it was over there because they didn't have much time here. But when we go over here to phase 3, they are completely held in by the line. No fencing at all on the outside, which allowed me to fence in just over half an acre. And you can see the forage that they have. Now this, you may not notice much tearing up of the earth at all because they're going to find a lot of food in this large area and they're going to move a lot. one issue we have with the old area is they always want to go back there because they're comfortable. Now, because we don't have the resources we did have up north, we are going to allow them to get to that old area, and that's just going to be a sacrifice spot. It'll grow back in about a year. But when we do block off that old area, instead of just twine right there, we actually do throw a fence up between the old area and the new area. Because if they want to escape at all, it's to go back to the old area, not out here where they're not familiar with this territory.
You're about to get dirty.
Right, little buddy? He said there's a human in there. It's okay, go ahead, it's your place. When we first allow the pigs to get in this space, they typically go around the entire perimeter. And they will take their little snouts and they'll dig up here and there and find out what's there. Then they go to the interior. Once they determine that this is their boundary, that's their area. And so they literally mark it as they go. You can see he's really curious, but he respects that line. He's not going to come within maybe 6 inches of it before he backs up. And that's the key. You want to teach them to back up and not charge forward, which is by nature their habit to do. Glad you could join us in this little piggy paradise here as she plays with Rosa the dog. If you're a subscriber, thank you very much. And if not, join us on our journey. And by the way, leave a comment. We love to read those.